Beyond the Gates spoilers tease that Martin Richardson has begun to realize that something is deeply wrong. It started with small things: a feeling of being watched, subtle shifts in his children's demeanor, and an unshakable discomfort that gnawed at him every time Kenny was near. But the moment that broke his calm was when he found Tyrell in the game room, seated opposite Kenny over a half-finished game of chess. Tyrell was smiling. Kenny was charming, disarming even. And Martin's instincts screamed. He pulled Tyrell aside after Kenny left and asked questions, gently at first, then with rising urgency. What had they talked about? Had Kenny said anything strange? Tyrell just shrugged. He was nice. We talked about strategy. Martin didn't buy it. A few days later, he caught sight of Kenny walking Samantha home from the community center, laughing at one of her jokes. The image of Kenny close to his daughter ignited a rage Martin hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just discomfort now. It was a warning. Kenny wasn't trying to reconcile or atone. He was embedding himself into Martin's life through his children. Martin called Smitty that same night. "I want eyes on them. Around the clock. Tyrell. Samantha. Anyone they talk to, anywhere they go." Smitty didn't ask why. He never did. His loyalty to Martin was absolute, shaped by years of blood and buried secrets. He began his surveillance immediately, moving between Tyrell's school and Samantha's extracurriculars like a shadow. At first, the kids didn't notice. But Samantha was too observant not to eventually catch on. "Why is Smitty following me?" she asked Martin one morning. Martin brushed it off with a vague line about heightened security, but Samantha didn't believe him. Neither did Tyrell. The trust between father and children began to strain. Meanwhile, Kenny remained patient. He never pushed too far, never acted aggressively. He simply existed, orbiting their world just closely enough to be noticed, but not feared. But underneath that calm surface was a carefully constructed plan, one that had been simmering for years. Kenny had lost everything because of Martin. He'd once been close to the Richardson family, a fixture in their lives. Until he learned the truth. Until Martin framed him, stole from him, and buried the evidence. Now, revenge wasn't just personal. It was meticulous. And it had to be complete. Kenny knew Martin's weakness wasn't himself. It was the people he protected. The illusion of family, the pretense of control. And Kenny would shatter that. He started by tracking Smitty's routine, observing his patterns. Smitty was good, disciplined, focused. But no one is perfect. Kenny found a crack, a small storage unit Smitty visited once a week to drop off untraceable gear and check burner phones. Kenny broke in one night and left behind a small transmitter. Within days, he knew every location Smitty visited. Then he prepared the next stage. Kenny had acquired blueprints to Martin's estate years ago through a construction crew who once worked on the property. Over time, he had used his old knowledge of the grounds to plan a quiet infiltration. But this time, it wasn't about entry. It was about destruction. In a separate, secluded part of town, Kenny assembled the device. It wasn't overly sophisticated, just brutal. Industrial explosives wired to a remote trigger, concealed inside a hollowed-out antique Martin kept in his library. He remembered the item well, a faux Roman bust Martin had once bragged about to guests. He knew exactly where to place the device. Late one night, under the cover of a blackout Kenny himself triggered, he broke into the estate. Smitty was off-site, handling a distraction Kenny had staged, a break-in call at the children's school. Martin had sent Smitty to investigate personally, trusting no one else. That night, while Martin slept and the children were tucked into their separate rooms, Kenny made his way into the study and embedded the explosive device. He left without a trace. The next morning, chaos unfolded. Tyrell awoke to find his tablet missing. Samantha noticed one of her art books was gone. Both children reported these incidents to Martin, who waved them off. But Smitty's instincts flared. He ran a silent sweep of the house and found signs of tampering. "You had a break-in," Smitty told Martin. "They were inside. And we didn't catch it." Martin's face went pale. "Do you think it was Kenny?" "If it was, he didn't come to talk." Panic set in. Smitty doubled the guards. The kids were pulled from school. Naomi was told to keep them inside. But nothing happened. Not that day. Not the next. And then Martin got the message. It came in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photo. It showed Samantha and Tyrell sleeping peacefully. In the corner of the room, just barely visible in the dark, was the shadow of Kenny's silhouette. On the back of the photo, you won't hear the click. Martin dropped the photo. His breath caught. He knew what it meant. The device was already planted. And it wasn't just for him. It was for everyone. He evacuated the house under the guise of a security drill. Smitty took the kids to an undisclosed location. Naomi was moved separately. Martin remained behind. He had a decision to make. Kenny watched from a hilltop with binoculars, waiting. His thumb hovered over the remote trigger. But something unexpected happened. Martin didn't flee. He returned to the library. Alone. He called Kenny on a secure line. The number hadn't changed. It rang once. "You want me here?" "I'm here," Martin said. Kenny didn't speak. "They're gone. You failed." Still no answer. Martin continued, his voice a mix of arrogance and exhaustion. "You want revenge? Fine. But you don't get to touch them." Kenny finally answered. "I already have. You just don't know how deep it goes." Martin looked around the room. The bust. The shelves. The walls. He reached for the item he thought might be rigged. His hands trembled. "You wouldn't," he said. Kenny didn't reply. Martin pulled the bust from the shelf and hurled it across the room. It shattered. Nothing happened. For a moment, he allowed relief. Then the explosion ripped through the far side of the house. It wasn't the bust. It was beneath the floorboards planted under the children's room. Martin screamed and ran toward the flames, toward the smoke. But there was no one there. Smitty had moved them. Kenny had known he would. The explosion wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to send a message. Everything Martin built could be undone. Everything he loved could vanish in an instant. The real detonation had only just begun. And Martin's reckoning had only started. Smoke poured from the broken windows of Martin Richardson's estate as emergency crews rushed to contain the blaze. From a safe distance, Martin watched what remained of his children's bedroom collapse inward. He stood motionless, lips bloodied from a fall, his phone still clutched in one trembling hand. The detonation hadn't claimed any lives, but it had taken something else, his illusion of invincibility. Smitty arrived moments later with Tyrell and Samantha, both shaken but unharmed. The kids stared at the smoldering ruins with wide, unblinking eyes. Samantha clutched her brother's hand, but said nothing. Tyrell looked at Martin with a mix of fear and confusion, his young mind beginning to piece together a truth he was never meant to know. "It was him, wasn't it?" Samantha finally asked. "Kenny did this." Martin hesitated. Yes. There was no sense in lying now. Whatever barrier had existed between Martin's past and their innocence had burned with the house. But what Martin didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that this was only the beginning. He knew Kenny wouldn't stop until he had nothing left. Smitty insisted on moving the children again. This time, to a remote safe house 2 towns over. Martin agreed, reluctantly. He trusted no one now. But if Kenny had gone so far as to infiltrate their bedrooms, then the threat wasn't just real, it was unstoppable. Smitty prepared for war. Meanwhile, Kenny watched the fire from a rooftop across the valley. He could see the panic in the aftermath. He could see the flashing red lights, the news crews gathering, the community whispering about the explosion. But what he really wanted was to see Martin break. He didn't get that yet. Martin hadn't cracked. But he would. Back at the safe house, Samantha began withdrawing. She stopped asking about school. She didn't sketch anymore. Tyrell became more protective, more alert, almost as if he sensed the roles shifting. One night, he asked Smitty directly, "Are we going to die?" Smitty crouched beside him and answered truthfully, "Not on my watch." But Smitty was worried. He'd fought dangerous men before. He'd hunted them, broken them. But Kenny was different. Kenny didn't want money. He didn't want power. He wanted devastation. Martin tried to get ahead of the storm. He contacted every fixer, every ally he had left. But his circle was shrinking. Too many had distanced themselves after years of quiet complicity. His influence, once absolute, was bleeding out. Then came the second package, delivered directly to the safe house. No name, no postage. Just a simple brown envelope addressed to Tyrell. Smitty intercepted it, opened it with gloves. Inside, a USB drive and a note. Let him see what kind of man his father really is. The drive contained video-grainy security footage from years ago. A backroom. Martin arguing with a man who soon vanished under suspicious circumstances. The man's name was Roy Kelly, a former accountant who had uncovered one of Martin's money laundering schemes. The footage didn't show Roy's death, but it didn't have to. The implication was clear. Smitty didn't show the kids. But Martin saw it. His rage was immediate. He called Kenny again. The number rang until voicemail. He left a message. You made your point. Come for me. Leave them out of it. But Kenny had no intention of leaving them out. Every message, every move was designed to unravel Martin emotionally. This wasn't just vengeance. It was desecration. A week later, the safe house was compromised. Smitty noticed a surveillance drone hovering over the tree line. Within an hour, someone breached the property perimeter. The children were rushed into a panic shelter below the cabin. Smitty stayed above ground, gun drawn. But the attack never came. Instead, a speaker left near the window began playing audio, a child's voice, manipulated to sound like Tyrell, begging for help. It was psychological warfare. Martin, pushed past his limit, demanded the children be flown out of the country. Naomi, called in from hiding, refused. Running won't save them, she said. You brought this into our lives. You fix it. But Martin couldn't fix it. Not in the way she wanted. Then, on the 12th day after the explosion, Kenny finally sent a message meant for public eyes. A video leaked online. A confession of sorts. Kenny appeared on screen, face partially obscured, detailing what Martin had done. Not just to him, but to others. Names. Accounts. Evidence. Everything. The video went viral. The Richardson name was scorched overnight. Investors pulled out. Investigations reopened. And for the first time, Martin faced legal exposure. But that wasn't what destroyed him. What destroyed him was Samantha and Tyrell seeing the video. He couldn't stop them. Naomi tried, but it was too late. Their eyes told the story. Horror. Disbelief. Betrayal. They weren't just frightened anymore. They were ashamed. That night, Tyrell refused to eat. Samantha wouldn't speak to Martin. She walked past him like a stranger. Martin sat in the dark, staring at the photo of them when they were younger, happier, untouchable. He knew Kenny had won. But Kenny wasn't done. His final move came as a whisper. Smitty received a private message on a secured line. A location. A time. Come alone if you want this to end. Smitty went, against Martin's wishes, deep into an abandoned railway tunnel north of town. Kenny was there, unarmed, waiting. You think you're protecting them, Kenny said. But you're not. You're preserving a lie. Then kill me and be done with it, Smitty replied. Not yet. Not until he feels what I felt. Every day. Every loss. Every second of silence. Smitty pulled his gun. Kenny stepped forward. Do it. But if you kill me, the next bomb goes off. Smitty froze. It was a bluff. Or maybe it wasn't. He couldn't risk it. Kenny handed him a flash drive. Tell him I win. Then he vanished into the tunnel. Smitty brought the drive back to Martin, who refused to watch it at first. But eventually he did. It contained a montage of everything, the surveillance footage, the recordings, even photos of the children in moments they thought they were alone. Kenny had been there, documenting their lives, reminding Martin that nothing was sacred. That night, Martin packed a suitcase and disappeared. No goodbye. No destination. Naomi took the kids and started over under new names. Smitty followed from afar, still protecting, still loyal. And Kenny? He returned to silence. Because he didn't need to strike again. Martin was already living in the ruins. 6 months later, the estate lay in ruins, overtaken by ivy and silence. What remained of Martin Richardson's world had collapsed into shadows and whispers. The fire damage was never repaired, the media frenzy had long since moved on, and no one in town dared speak his name aloud anymore. It was as if he had never existed. But Martin was very much alive. He drifted between cities under aliases, paying in cash, renting rooms in forgotten motels, hiding from the world that now saw him as a villain. The man who had once walked through boardrooms and gala halls with unchecked power now couldn't look in a mirror without flinching. Not because of guilt Martin had buried that long ago, but because of what he had lost. His name, his children, his legacy. Tyrell and Samantha now lived with Naomi in a coastal town under a government protection program initiated quietly by Smitty through old federal contacts. The twins had started school again. Samantha had cut her hair. Tyrell had taken up chess again but refused to play white. He said he didn't want the first move. Naomi watched over them fiercely, refusing interviews, blocking every attempt from journalists or ex-investors to reach them. She had no interest in clearing Martin's name. She only wanted her children to sleep through the night without checking the locks 3 times. Kenny hadn't resurfaced. But the damage he caused echoed like aftershocks. Martin's private accounts were frozen. Investigators were still digging into his finances, and whispers of an upcoming indictment circled in legal forums. But Martin didn't care about prosecution anymore. That punishment would be public. He was living the private one. One rainy morning, Martin stood at a payphone in St. George, Utah. He dialed a number he hadn't called in over a year. Naomi answered after a long pause. "You should have died in that fire," she said flatly. Martin didn't flinch. "I need to speak to the kids. They don't want to hear your voice. Please. 1 minute." Naomi hesitated. "Then, you have 30 seconds. Tyrell got on the line first. His voice deeper now. "Why did you lie to us?" Martin exhaled. "Because I thought I had to. Because I was trying to protect something that was never real." "Are you sorry?" "Yes. But it doesn't matter if you don't believe me." Tyrell was silent. Then, without warning, handed the phone to Samantha. "Are you still running?" she asked. "I'm not sure anymore." "Then maybe you haven't learned anything." The line went dead. Martin stayed at the booth long after the call ended. Rain soaked through his coat. He didn't move. Later that day, in a nearby diner, Martin sipped bitter coffee and unfolded a newspaper left on the counter. On the last page was a photo. A blurry shot of a man in a hoodie placing flowers near a school playground. The caption said nothing about the subject, only that the flowers were for the children who had been targeted in the Richardson bombing 6 months ago. Martin knew instantly who it was. The stance. The build. The signature on the card. Kenny had been there. Watching. Always watching. But there were no more threats. No more warnings. Kenny had done what he set out to do. Not kill Martin. But exile him. The final act of revenge wasn't death. It was making Martin irrelevant. And in that silence, the final gate had closed for good.